Good afternoon and welcome back to Stop Loss with Spencer, episode 10. We made it double digits, baby. And today we're going to talk about a stop loss quote, interpreting, making sense of a proposal from a carrier. Very simple format. Of course, we could go way more in depth, way more in the weeds and really get into provisions and enhancements and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, you need to make sense of the most basic meat and potatoes of a quote. So that's what we're going to do. All right. So what we're looking at is two deductible levels side by side. In the black, we have a 100K spec. In the blue, we have a 150K spec. So just looking at two deductibles, sometimes you'll see three on a page. Doesn't really matter what underwriting system that carrier is using. Pretty much every one of the quotes that you've ever seen for stop loss is going to include these basic elements. Okay? So 100K, 150K spec, only difference in the two columns. So right here, we're looking at the number of employees enrolled in the underlying medical plan that applied to the stop loss contract at the time of quoting. So very important to understand. When you get a stop loss quote, they are going to base it on a census at a moment in time. That won't really be the final census. Of course, monthly headcount is going to fluctuate when actual enrollment comes in, but the baseline for their quote is going to assume a certain number of enrolled. So at this moment in time, we're looking at 250 underlying or enrolled employees in the policy. So regardless of the deductible level, we're always going to have the same headcount. And the reason we look at it on a monthly basis is all of the rates and factors will also be given on a PEPM basis. So that way, regardless of what the actual enrollment is every single month, the employer or the TPA, whoever is doing the billing, is going to know exactly what to charge PEPM based on that enrollment. Okay? So 250 enrolled. We've got our fixed cost section, which is your premium section, which that is your specific and your aggregate premium. The reason it's fixed is regardless of the head count, you're always going to be paying $100 PEPM for your specific portion and $5 PEPM for your aggregate portion. Okay? Fixed cost. You can see the differential, right, as you go up in spec, as you raise that deductible level, it's actually going to decrease your specific premium. Now, these are made up numbers. I have no idea if my sloping for all you underwriters is appropriate or correct between the two deductible levels, but just wanted to show for illustrative purposes that your specific premium will actually go down, and actually pretty significantly as you start bumping up that specific deductible level. Now, the inverse is true for the aggregate premium. There's going to be a very slight increase for the aggregate premium as you raise your deductible. And quite frankly, I forgot, had it explained to me one time. Here's an opportunity for one of you smart underwriters to remind me why the ag premium does go up slightly as the deductible goes up. But just know this is what that matrix is going to look like, right? Your spec premium is going to go down, your ag premium is going to go slightly up as you go up in deductible levels, okay? So that's your fixed cost, spec and ag premium. Simple, right? Now we have our variable cost, which is our claims cost. And the number that the carrier is going to give you is something called the aggregate factor. If you remember the aggregate corridor video, calculating an annual attachment point, they use an aggregate factor on a PEPM basis, again PEPM, to show what they predict to be the maximum claims liability for this year before that reimbursement might kick in, right? So we have a $1,000 aggregate factor for this deductible level, and then we have $1,100 aggregate factor for that higher deductible level. So as you step up in spec deductible, you're also going to see an increase in your aggregate factors as well. So aggregate factor, that's a variable cost, okay? And remember, if you recall from that corridor video, that buffer, right, that 25% corridor is how they're actually calculating that number, but it's also derived off an expected number. So what expected number did they use? They don't always actually give you what the expected number is explicitly, but there's a very easy way for you to determine what they used as an expected cost projection, and that is to take your aggregate factor, divide it by your corridor, which in this case the actual math would be 1,000 divided by 1.25, and that will tell you what that carrier is expecting the claims to be on a PEPM basis. They're expecting $800 PEPM in claims, okay? And then we did that for this deductible level. That $1,100 divided by 1.25 is $880, okay? So you may disagree completely with their expected number, and you may have your own underwriting department or actuaries that will do that calculation for you. But at the very least, if they give you an aggregate factor, at least you know what they're utilizing as an expected number. Based on that number, the given corridor, you can back into this number, okay? And then you can use that as, I guess, an opportunity for negotiations if you disagree. I would highly advise you to either engage an outside consultant for underwriting, or hopefully have them in-house. And you do your own projections, of course, because it gives you foundation to negotiate with these carriers, all right? So we've gone over the fixed costs, we've gone over the variable costs, but all of this is effectively useless from a budget perspective unless you know what the annualized projections look like. And that's where we will pull in these factors in order to use that as the basis to calculate an annual maximum liability and an annual expected liability. So here's the very simple way you would do that. You take 250 times this plus this plus this, your fixed costs and your variable costs. So 250 times 100 plus 5 plus 1,000 times 12. Simple, right? Basic Excel formula. I could probably say it out loud. Equals sum in these cells times this cell times 12, right? And we can all do that probably if we've spent any time in Excel at all. But that number will get you into a maximum liability. So the maximum exposure with claims and fixed costs this stop loss carrier projects will be $3.315 million annually at the 100K spec and $3.546 million annually at the 150K spec. Yes, I did that in a Google Sheet, and yes, I also checked it on my phone. For you geeks out there that want to check the math, you're welcome to do all of it as well. And then we also have an expected liability number. And this is going to be really important to understand the difference in maximum exposure versus expected exposure. You can see there's a $500,000 difference in those numbers. And that was really where you could start building that baseline for a comparison to come off fully insured or come off level funded. Is this really a competitive option? Maybe we have a projected liability number that we calculated ourselves. But you want to be able to utilize all of these components, understand them, so you can determine are these competitive, and start using all of these numbers in your analysis to determine what deductible level may be appropriate. There's a lot of other things that will go into that, but if you don't understand the dollars and cents, then the rest of it is effectively moot, okay? So that's it. I mean, not a whole lot of really, mind-blowing information, but I think this is important, especially if you're an account manager, a marketing specialist, somebody that's receiving these quotes in all day, trying to make sense of them. Maybe there's slightly different formats that you're seeing them in. At the end of the day, this is the meat and potatoes, nuts and bolts, brass tacks of the stuff you need to know in order to spreadsheet, I hate that word, but spreadsheet stop loss quotes, okay? So, hey, stop loss video number 10, stop loss with Spencer, it's in the books. We did it. Thanks guys for watching. I'll see you next time.